Just a little while longer. As he pressed his heat against hers, her heart thundered, adrenaline spiking the cord. She forced away thoughts of the random asshole who'd just died, the mother of spiders, the doom that still haunted the town of Gossamer Loom. For these sparse moments, she even let her own loathing of her stupid self recede, drowning it in the pleasure of Coop's calloused hands on her bare skin. His mouth found her throat, and she arched into him. Gasping when doing so sent a stab of pain through her neck, shoulder, and arm. But the flare of the agony did nothing to quell the open floodgate of bliss that overwhelmed her. His breath steamed her skin as she tugged him closer, her nails digging into his bare back. He groaned loudly, a sound of pent-up longing being released at last. Any semblance of caution or restraint vanished, their bodies locked in frenzied, rough, synchronized thrusts. She grabbed onto him for dear life, tears sliding down her cheeks. For a few breathless seconds, everything else ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, in a dark corner of a decrepit mansion, finally giving themselves to each other. When the climax hit, she cried out, her body shuddering with pleasure and stabbing pain. Every nerve in her system was on fire. She felt him tense, his breath stuttering, and he hissed her name like a vow or a prayer. It was like it absolved her. It was like it redeemed her. Ivy. At least I got him, she thought. If I die right now, at least there was Coop. Josiah had always known the shrine room was there, but before Leslie had come into his life, before the Weaver had drawn Theron all together, he'd never really known what it was, much less been inside. Now tonight, it was calling to him. As he made his way through the winding halls, the air was electric. It hummed with an energy that prickled the back of his neck. Each step echoed off the walls. He had seen his grandfather's ghost. He just knew it. Josiah finally reached the heavy wooden door, carved with symbols. He had no prayer of understanding. The handle was cold under his palm. It was like grabbing a handful of ice. For a moment, he was afraid. Something told him there was danger in that room. But another part of him, some urgent voice beneath his own thoughts, insisted he had to go inside. His heart started beating faster, and he was suddenly exhilarated as he pulled the door open. A wave of stale, dusty air rushed out. It smelled of old incense and ancient stone. The room was cluttered with relics. Everything was coated in a layer of dust. Then Josiah saw that in the center of the room was a goblet, and at the goblet's center, a candle was poking out. A curious, pulsing warmth spread across his chest when he laid eyes on the goblet. It was filled with a strange bronze liquid that almost appeared to be swirling around the candle at the center under its own power, as if alive. When Josiah stepped closer, the flame of the candle jumped. It was almost reaching for him. The hair on his arms stood on end. He peered into the goblet. The liquid glimmered. The candlelight's reflection danced on the surface in chaotic patterns. He noticed that nestled at the bottom of the substance was a glistening object, a round shape. Carefully, he placed 2 fingers into the chilling, syrupy fluid, fishing around until he felt the shape. He lifted the object into view. It was a medallion with an intricate pentagram carved into it, around the center gem, which appeared to be a skull-shaped diamond filled with blood. It was a near-identical twin to the one Mrs. Hargrave had worn the night she died. He held it up, letting the candlelight play across its etched surface. Vertigo settled in his gut. The floor shifted under him. He didn't have time to puzzle over the medallion before the air in the room changed again. It was charged with static, humming at a frequency he felt in his feet. He barely had time to react before a chummening shape materialized in his peripheral vision, then lunged toward him. Jaw stumbled backward, heart slamming, but the firm wore on him in a breath, It was translucent and wreathed in shadows, but the lace was disturbingly clear. He recognized it from the painting's grandfather. He rasped. The ghost's hands reached out, passing through Josmata's chest with a chill that made his vision flash white. It plunged deepest, merging with him in a momentary burst of agonizing pressure. But then the pain was gone, and Josiah fell into a transcendent comdot of trance. Memories that were writ his own flooded his consciousness. Moments from Zachariah, his life-old hunts in an orchard, the construction of the estate, scandalous, clandestine meetings with his same-sex lover that he had met in seminary. Each of these and Mom tumbled through Jaswalk's mind, as though the man's life was being played on fast forward. A flurry of knowledge entered his mind. Decades of wisdom, family secrets, the answers to many of life's riddles, the reasons why their bloodline had always been so set apart. Josiah knew in that instant what the ghost really was. It wasn't a ghost at all, it was the past and the present. Josiah's own present, his brother's present, and Leslie's. The ghost was the person Emily never became, because she'd been too afraid to be vulnerable, was the person he'd seen underneath her bullshit every once in a while. It was every moment of courage in all of human history. It was the willingness of a Grassel author or grandmother to die so their descendants might have a better life. It was every sperm cell that hadn't made it to his mother's egg when he was conceived. It was everyone in the Octagon, it was everyone in Gossamer Loom. Across space and time, his grandfather, Zachariah Loomridge, was who everyone dead or alive truly dwells. He knew in that instant that the heart and mind of the human race is actually one. The poets and prophets and punk rockers had all been right about everything. The best of all of humankind is one great through line, and even the smallest, most pathetic human life is interwoven with the others along that through line. This ghost was the revelation that we are all the same soul. And Josiah felt so hopeful in that moment, experiencing that revelation, that nothing old Sam could ever do would make him feel afraid again. He began to think not only with his own mind, but with his grandfather's mind. He carried the essence of Zakana Loomridge with him, inside him, all around him. And then he heard Zachariah, his voice in his mind, authoritative even in death. William Ashbury, I must not go on. He will bring ruin. He has absorbed his grandson's soul, and soon he will drain an innocent woman's life force to regain his youth and his former strength. The harm he has already done must be reversed, and he must not be allowed to do any further harm. Josiah's body went rigid, fingers splayed against the dusty floor, the medallion still clenched in one fist. Newfound understanding flowed through his heart and mind. Helen is in the graveyard. William Ashbury is with her. She's in danger, terrible danger. The knowledge seared through him like a brand. He saw a flicker of Helen's face, wide-eyed and terrified, the monstrous gen of something lurking nearby. He tasted the grave dirt and the stench of decay that clung to William Ashbury, even though he'd never encountered the man, or whatever he'd become, in person. But Zachariah's memories were enough. They told him everything he needed to know. Fuck, he panted, struggling to stand. His legs wobbled as if he'd just run a marathon. The candle at the center of the goblet guttered, its flame dancing low. The shrine room felt like it was spinning. Shadows, stretching and contracting in corners of the walls. Josiah danned his grandfather's blood-cath medallion without a second thought. Then he turned and staggered toward the door, learning to find his footing now that he carried the weight of an ancient soul. Each step was a small victory against the unsteady ground. He paused only once on the threshold to steal a final glance at the shrine. The goblet still sat there, the bronze liquid swirling slowly around the candlelight. Then he tore his gaze away and plunged back into the corridor. Everything around him screamed at him to hurry. Helen was out there alone in the graveyard with a dangerously mangled soul, and if Josiah didn't reach her soon, it would be too late. He barreled toward the mansion's front doors, dread clawing at his insides. "Hang on, Helen," he thought, crossing the threshold into the night. A swirl of wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves. "I'm coming." Leslie woke from the dream with tears on her cheeks. The Tamal image she remembered was Josiah's adult hand wrapped around hers, standing before the courtyard of Loomridge Haven, while his face, stern yet oddly paternal, officiated their wedding. Vivid, it was disorienting to realize she was still trapped in sleeping uncomfortably on the old wooden floor of the Empt, started keeping her at night. Her heart thundered as she read all around her. The room was small and musty, the walls warped damage. Broken shutters rattled in the occasional wind. Outside, cracked overhead light fixture was utterly useless. Wiping the telled cheeks, Leslie pushed the dream aside, mourned to Josiah, she the longing running through her. They'd barely known each other in the of things, but it was a borage she had clung to. Too bad it can't ever go bad. I'm never going to grow up. Too bad I'm going to die here. She lot them there felt so rough for no reason, trying not to let despair root itself too deeply in her heart. The already known and such deeply rooted despair for one lifetime. Thawley the toos from the flower and steadied herself, swaying slightly, by tinking away the last auments of sleep and dreamlike warmth. Then she froze. There was one narrow window in the room, and for some reason, she felt that something beyond that window was calling for her. Her earlier attempts at prying the bones free had resulted in splinters and bruises. Old Flam must have reinforced them from the outside. But now, something else drew her attention. Movement in the gray half-light. Leslie carefully pushed aside a sliver of the broken shutter to see what by beyond. Her breath caught in her throat. There, in the direction of the graveyard, which was visible from the edge of Old Sam's property, she saw a lone figure stumbling between the tilted headstone screens. Even from this distance, she knew with certainty that it was her mother. She recognized the silhouette, the posture, and the somewhat stupid way she was moving in that. But her mother was writ alone. Another shape lurched closer from behind a twisted oak. At first, Leslie thought it might be a living person, another unfortunate traveler, or perhaps Old Sam himself. But the figure's movements were stiff, unnatural, and when the figure's visage caught the pale glow, it revealed gaunt cheeks, taut flesh, and a slack jaw that swung open as if earthinged. A wave of recognition hit her. It was a corpse like the ones that had pursued them the night she'd been saved by Mrs. Hargrave. The corpo was stalking her mother, who was half hidden behind crumbling tombstones, pulse hominid. "Mom," she whispered. She could barely see her math expression from here, but the fear radiating from the cemetery was undeniable. Leslie felt the pull. It was the same pull that had brought her and others of the Weaver's octagon together. Her body screamed at her to run Mother's side, to put herself between her mother and that half-rotten monad. She shoved the shutters closed and turned toward just an urgent need to get to the graveyard. Her stomach knotted with the knowledge that Old Sam would think of some horrible way to punish her for leaving Gring. But so what? He was going to rape and kill her anyhow, and the alternative was unthinkable. If she stayed here, her mother would be at the mercy of that thing that was stalking her in the graveyard. Leslie made her way to the front of the house as quickly and quietly as she could. She smelled rancid cooking grease and something more pungent, the stench of his basement, though she tried not to dwell on it. Every shadow felt alive, as though something beyond the walls was listening to her pulsing body, waiting to see what she would do. The handle of the front door was cold and unwelcoming, but she took a breath and tuned it confidently. For a split second, hope flared within her as the door gave way without resistance. But then she stepped outside, and an invisible force slammed into her so powerfully she lost her footing. She barely had time to process what happened next. One moment she was on the threshold, the next she was hurtling backward through darkness. The world twisted. Folding in on itself, it was as though reality yawned open beneath her feet, swallowing her whole. She landed hard on a concrete floor with her right arm, elbow first, and striking down with a bone-jarring impact. Dust and damp air flooded her senses, making her cough walk. When she lifted her head, panic seized her. She was in his basement again. The one she had passed through when old Sam had taken her from Loomridge Haven. Its cinder block walls loomed around her, lined with shelves that brimmed with jars of foul substances and the decomposing remains of things that had once been alive. A single, naked bulb flickered overhead. The corners of the space were lost to shadow, and the air felt thick with stagnant decay. She called Hermafante's steady feet hugging her based with her left hand. Her eyes landed on the item, had been scanning for them out on the Thun halt cleared by gummy toes. The stench, a overwhelming wreck of putrefaction that made her and the Bettys worrying mindless and hungry. Something grabbed her ankle once a girl, now half calupied in skang decay, had regulaces. The cold basement sun, its progress left a thick, the Regis Bwichet revealing blackened gums and the remnants of cracked teeth. Her mouth patted in a tortured groan, as if she needed to speak but caught form the words. A wave of cold shock athered down Les Expire. "Oh my God," Leslie whispered. It was Emily. She decomposed even fumes, but he still had het. He was still holding on to her corpse. She longed to pry Emily's rotting lingers off her ankle, but the grip was supersingly strong, or repelled by a dispensed urgency. Then with a rasping well cough, Emily's body spoke destry. The word gargled out in a tortured hiss, the vowels mangled. As of pun breath hit Lee's reamals, the eyes rolled half-formed in their sockets. They whined with the stable agores twitching wild, "Destroy me." Leshta shook her heat and involuntarily Manaricia knee-jerk and reactionary hot hurts to be dealt. "My body," Roman Emily moaned. Her soggy half-rotten eyes clouded but still brimming with tuned up to meet Lasku's. "Please destroy me." Leslie's Mina, the another brick? Was there still something all the real Emily left? The D that these corpses could be puppeteered was homifying enough that they might the OEM decay was beyond comprehension. She tried to well herself. It was Sam's trusted magic pulling the shings, but the agony in Emily's tall decomposed eyes, as watery arid putrid as they were, felt all too real. Leslie's resolve wavered. She felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes, her heart twisting painfully. A fresh wave of fury coursed through her. How did he do this to people? How could anyone? She swallowed hard, scarring the basement. Her mouth tasted sour from the lingering odor of human flesh rotting away. She had to do something. As horrifying as the thought of euthanizing another person was, the suffering in Emily's corpse's eyes was even more horrific. They'll find something, she choked out, shaking off the stiff undead grip as gently as she could. "Just wait," and a hacking sound broke from Emily's throat, a scream warped into a sound of bubbling anguish. Each movement of her rotting limbs released a wet squelch. Leslie fought down her own bile. "It's okay," she lied, though everything around her was the farthest thing from okay. "Till Phil find a way to help destroy you." She took a stumbling step toward the stash of corpses, losing her footing and nearly tripping over another dead person's limp arm. Her eyes danced wildly over the rows of the dead. Some were indeed motionless, but she caught more faint twitches from other bodies, dozens more that might also be partially conscious. She clawed at the basement walls, searching for a door or an exit. The only door she could find was the one that had stood behind her when she'd landed there a moment ago, and it was locked. That was the path leading upstairs to Old Sam's kitchen. "Emily," she whispered over her shoulder, "I'm trapped too, but I'll figure something out. I swear." Her voice trembled with hollow determination. She had no weapon, no real plan. But she knew she couldn't remain in this charnel pit forever. Not while her mother was out there in the graveyard, possibly moments away from being attacked by that rotting monster. She took a calming breath and scanned her surroundings again. She noticed a cinder block on the corner of the tarp containing the stack of corpses. Without a second thought, she darted toward it, breathing through her mouth to shed the stench of death, and hoisted up the cement block with all her might. Then, she reared back and hurled the cinder block underhand at Emily's half-formed skull with all her might, pulling a muscle in her already sore right arm. The cinder block crashed into Emily's skull, smashing it like a rotted pumpkin. Leslie's vision blurred with tears. A splatter of foul fluids hit her hands and wrists, booming her nose with the stench of congealed blood and liquefying tissue. For a moment it seemed as though this plan had worked, but then, impossibly, the arms of her former schoolyard bully began to flail helplessly. Clearly, she was in even grave pain, and now her head was a heap of crumbled rot. "Fuck," Leslie whimpered. She tasted the salt of her own tears, and the acidic tang of rising vomit made it worse. The corpse, no longer identifiable as the young Emily, continued to thrash through the night, and Leslie could do nothing but wait for something worse to happen. But she wouldn't have to wait for long. Helen had huddled behind a cracked headstone for what felt like hours. Somewhere in the darkness to her right, she could hear the resurrected remains of William Ashbury, a shambling about as he searched for her. She dared only the smallest of movements, sliding her fingertips along the granite to peek past the carved edge. Her vision blurred with tears as she spotted him in a sliver of moonlight. The pools of goo in his eye sockets darted over the graveyard like eyes, scanning with unmistakable hunger. From her hiding place, she tried to swallow her panic. She had to remain still and keep her breath from making sound. "I can't die here," she thought desperately. "I know you're there," he croaked. "I thought you were my grandson." Helen shifted her position, pressing her back against the smooth face of a neighboring